President Obama was reelected in November 2012. So then in January 2013, when his first term ended, he got sworn in for his second term on that same day. And what's a little awkward about the timing for presidents who win a second term is that in late January or early February, they go through the pomp and circumstance of starting a second term and doing their second inaugural address. And that's important because it needs to encompass what the country has been through in the president's first term, also the reasons why the president was just reelected by the country for 4 more years. And then it also has to include the vision that the president has for the next 4 years, given the nation's current challenges. And then right away, as soon as that inaugural speech is done, they have to do their State of the Union speech, which is also a huge deal and for which everyone has basically the same expectations that they had for the inaugural address that they just had to give a few days ago. I mean, the second speech is only a few days after that other huge speech, but of course it has to be a totally different thing. It's very awkward timing for every re-elected president. And in 2013, when President Obama gave his State of the Union right on the heels of his second inaugural, he decided that he would hit some of the same issues in both speeches. In the inaugural, for example, he said this. He said, quote, "We know that America thrives when every person can find independence and pride in their work, when the wages of honest labor liberate families from the brink of hardship." Then, in the State of the Union address a few days later, the president made the same point, but he made it with way more specificity. He said in that second speech, quote, "Tonight, let's declare that in the wealthiest nation on earth, no one who works full time should have to live in poverty. Let's raise the federal minimum wage. We should be able to get that done." President Obama proposed raising the minimum wage right after he was reelected in his inaugural, and then again in his second term State of the Union. And then he went back to it again at the next year's State of the Union, saying that raising that minimum wage is something that should happen federally. It should happen nationwide. And of course, the Republicans who control the House of Representatives, they obviously have no interest whatsoever in raising the minimum wage. But since President Obama front-burnered the issue the way that he has, the minimum wage has been raised in a bunch of states. States like Connecticut and Hawaii and Maryland and Minnesota. Even if Republicans won't let it get anywhere at the federal level, it has been Democratic legislators in blue states who've been raising the minimum wage where they can. Until now. This week, an exception to that rule was born, when, for the first time, a state with a Republican governor and a Republican legislature, they too voted that they too would raise the minimum wage. Hey, Republicans in Michigan, bucking the tide. It's only been blue states and Democrats who wanted to raise the minimum wage before now, but Michigan Republicans just did it. And apparently didn't give them much trouble. Look, quote, "It passed both the House and the Senate and was signed into law by Governor Rick Snyder in less than 1 hour. Wow, Republicans racing to raise the minimum wage, rushing to do it, eager to do it. Is this backwards day? Is fried cheese no longer fattening? Are trout now using worms to catch me? No, turns out it was one big trick play. They rushed this thing through in Michigan 2 nights ago, and they passed it in under an hour because the very next day, Michigan activists were due to turn in over 300,000 signatures to put on the ballot in November a much larger increase in the minimum wage. Okay, that's why Republicans did it. See, polling shows that that much larger increase in the minimum wage is really popular in Michigan. It's supported by a big majority of the state's voters. And past experience shows that if you put raising the minimum wage on the ballot, that can drive up voter turnout, and those voters tend to lean Democratic. So by getting the issue on the ballot, these Michigan campaigners were, A, all but assured that the policy would pass and become law in the state because it's really popular. But B, as a side benefit, Democratic candidates running in that election, say the Democrat running for U.S. Senate in Michigan or the Democrat running against Rick Snyder for governor in Michigan, those Democrats would probably benefit as well from being on the ballot alongside that very popular minimum wage rise, which would probably drive up Democratic voter turnout. And so the Republicans in Michigan, knowing these signatures were coming in yesterday, knowing the thing was going to qualify for the ballot and that was going to be terrible for them, the Republicans in Michigan figured out their trick play. And it was basically a preemptive strike. By passing their own new lower minimum wage legislation this week, Republicans preempted the ballot measure. Look, the main objective of Republicans in the legislature was to keep the $10.10 wage measure off the November ballot and kill the petition drive. That measure could have brought to the polls Democrats who support the wage measure in large numbers. So yes, Michigan Republicans did pass a rise in the minimum wage this week, and they are the only Republican-controlled state anywhere in the country to do that. But they only did it to stop a larger and more popular increase that was going to clobber them at the polls in November. That's why they came up with a trick play to try to stop it. Ta-da! Michigan, you're amazing.